Right, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. Bedfordshire Climate Change Forum is very excited to welcome Rosalind Redhead. Rosalind, from September 2019, attempted to live on 1 tonne of carbon for a year, and she kept a journal online as she went. As she says on her website, this project aims to give life to what net zero carbon means from a personal perspective, to add human flesh to an abstract and remote number, to inform policy and investment, to engage and educate the public, to discuss lifestyle choices and adaptation, to make the everyday a work of art. And I would like to hand over to Rosalind now, who's going to talk to us. And at the end of her talk, we will open up the chat function. Any questions you have, pop in there, and we'll be reading them out. And if anyone is feeling shy, set your settings to message me directly and I can ask questions anonymously on your behalf. So without further ado, welcome, Ros.
Hi, thanks so much for inviting me today. I'm, to Bedford Climate Change Forum. I can see lots of people here, it's great. And I'm going to share my screen now and start my talk. This is very much, I would say, a rough guide to the net carbon zero life. First of all, I'm going to set the context of why I started this. If we go back to October 2018, I mean, it was a really pivotal time. And I remember being at Parliament Square and Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion joined up, so they were there, but also the IPCC 1.5C special report had come out just earlier in that month. But what I think was a lot of troubling for a lot of activists and campaigners at that time was this sort of gulf between this idea of reaching net carbon zero in 2050 and Extinction Rebellion 2025 and Youth Climate 2030. And yeah, I was very involved in XR, and I went to a lot of the youth climate strikes in early 2019. And yeah, I was very concerned about that gap, but also I felt something was missing. The way we were engaging with the public, I felt that was missing. So when this report appeared, it sort of popped up in my Twitter feed, very unexpected, and it completely changed the way we were looking at this. So it started to really talk about lifestyle carbon budgets. So we were used to these very top-down, massive figures and very abstract concepts of where we needed to get to at net carbon zero. But this really was about changes in lifestyles. And it talked about, so these were very specific numbers. So 2.5 tons by 2030, 1.4 by 2040, and then 0.7 by 2050. So these are the targets for citizens, what they would have to live on per year. So these were very, very specific. And it said that changes in lifestyles are not only inevitable, but would need to be radical and start immediately. So also it was much more kind of like, we need to get on with this. So what does a lifestyle carbon budget mean? It means the carbon footprint as defined by the greenhouse gas emissions directly emitted from or indirectly by household consumption. Now, this is dividing up that idea of your personal lifestyle budget from the government and capital formation, which is basically business, mostly about business. So this is really talking about focusing on what we would need to do as citizens. Now, this may seem to a lot of people like, oh, well, that's not important, but I will kind of, in a sense, try and try and communicate why I think it's actually essential for policy as well as for us to adjust personally. Now, during this project, this really surprised me that 72% of global emissions are related to households. So in other words, you know, this is absolutely essential. This is an absolutely essential part of our move towards net carbon zero. Now, I showed the numbers, but really what I was concentrating on was 1 tonne. Now, you may think, okay, I'm saying here 0.7 tonnes, and it isn't quite the same. I'll go and explain why that is later on. But this is one of the most interesting calculations that I saw. So to get down to net carbon zero, we're really looking at what our natural ecosystems can absorb. So this is exactly a carbon budget like the other carbon budgets. So if you think about it, our natural ecosystems can absorb 0.7 tonnes per year per person. So if you divide the whole, you know, the whole of the scientific calculation of what nature can absorb, you come up with 0.7 tonnes per person. So this is divided equally amongst global systems across the world. Now, some people call this a carbon budget, but I actually don't think it is a carbon budget in quite the same way as the other carbon budgets, because this is basically a scientific calculation. This isn't a social, political, economic, or even moral calculation. This is a scientific calculation of what we can emit per person and that our natural ecosystems can absorb. So I would call this natural carbon balance. So 0.7 tonnes is natural carbon balance, and that is what is living within planetary boundaries. Now, what we often hear about are much bigger carbon budgets, and this is if you add in these negative emission technologies, which are talked about a lot at the COPs, you then can increase it a bit. So, for instance, if we go to the net carbon zero, so there's 0.7 tonnes just using natural ecosystems. If you include these technologies, then it goes up to 1.5. Now, the problem is that is a very risky societal decision because they don't exist at any scale and are not tested out in the way that they're proposing. So the 0.7 tonnes is really to do with the natural ecosystems, but this is kind of an obvious thing to point out, but if you destroy the natural ecosystems, obviously that budget goes down. So we are therefore very reliant on maintaining our natural ecosystems and also making our agriculture and other land uses to be viable. Now, here's another calculation which is backed up. So our entire individual lifetime carbon budget is 30 tonnes of carbon. That's per person. That's the entire budget, the lifestyle budget, divided equally across all global systems. Now, I call this a sort of number crunch slide, because then if we go and look at how we're going to fit that in, the average EU system currently emits 9 tonnes, the US 17 tonnes. The average Zimbabwean emits 1.6 tonnes, but you know there are people in Africa only on 0.2 tonnes. So, and then the average is 5 tonnes per year. But if you're looking, put that, you know, in the entire individual lifetime budget. That isn't a lot. And then a new car produces 8 to 50 tons of carbon just to manufacture. A return flight London to Hong Kong is an average of 4.5 tons. A business return flight London to Hong Kong is 10 tons. Do 3 of those, and you've blown through your carbon budget, you know. But I'm also pointing out that solar, which will last for 25 to 30 years, if you put a solar array on your home, then that's 5 tons. Now, I would say that's a good investment of your carbon budget. So then I think we need to put these figures in context and perspective. So the richest 10% are producing. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry about that. That's me. Oops, sorry. Sorry about that. The richest 10% are burning up about 49% of the carbon at the moment. So if we go to this, and you may be familiar with this Oxfam wine glass, but this one's slightly changed. It's a Larry Edwards version, and basically he's highlighted the red. We're in the red, and the top 10%. I mean, I think people are always very surprised that you only have to be earning £27,000 per year to be in the top richest 10%. And so that is a lot of us. I mean, I think the average income in the UK is about 33,000, something like that. So, you know, this is a lot of us. And even if you're going down to the top 20%, you know, we're still a lot in the red. I mean, obviously the most in the red, but this, you know, this kind of level of overconsumption is really, you know, off the scale. I mean, I would say it's hyperconsumption. I mean, it's so out of sync with planetary boundaries that anyway, you know, I think the point is made in this graph. But also, I wanted to include this one next to it because this gives us sort of more understanding of the lifestyle impacts. So 80% of the global population has never flown. And if you look at this map, that makes it very clear who is flying. It's in the global north. And if you look at the global south, you can see that, you know, the disparity and how unequal that level of consumption, carbon consumption is. These are two images of what is called the ticking carbon clock. So the first one appeared in New York in September 2020. So it's saying at our current emission rates, we will hit 1.5 degrees in under 7 years. And then another one was projected in Glasgow in June last year, just before the COP26. And you see it's gone down to 6 years and 226 days. I don't actually know, it'd be interesting, somebody might want to look up what it is right now, but you can see that we're running through our carbon budget extremely quickly to stay under 1.5 degrees. And I would argue that we're wasting what we should be spending on it, which is investing in some really important stuff, which I'll come to later on. I feel mixed about this slide because on one hand, I was so pleased to see this finally go into an IPCC report. And it is quite sort of mind-blowing that the demand side mitigation side, this is the first time it's appeared in an IPCC report, being left off for all these years. But this one, you can see I've highlighted choosing low carbon options such as car-free living, plant-based diets without or very little animal products, low carbon sources of electricity and heating, as well as local holiday plans can reduce an individual's carbon footprint by up to 9 tons. The current average for the UK citizen is 13 tons. So it would, those choices would significantly reduce UK citizens' carbon footprint. So on to my project. So I called it a rapid imperfect prototype because I was really trying to get down to the nitty-gritty of this, and I suppose in a sense model it or experiment with it, but in a sort of more embodied way. You know, what would this look like if somebody had to get there very quickly? You know, if we had to move very quickly to this, how would we do it, and what would that look like, and is it at all possible? I mean, you know, I didn't know when I started out. So my daily budget is of 2.74 kilograms of carbon, and I did a journal, an everyday journal. I'm going to show you a page of that in a short while. But I decided to include as much as I could. So, you know, food, drink, transport, entertainment, shopping, data, showers, washing up, eating, you know, whatever I could find information on. And I have to say, there was not a lot of information. So I was really relying on this 2010 version of How Bad Are Bananas by Mike Berners-Lee. So I knew that some of these calculations were going to be out of date, but actually this was my best source. There were other things, you know, things like Zoom and data and you know, other things that we do now, video streaming, things like that. You know, they were beginning to be investigating. In fact, the BBC was starting to do its own research on iPlayer and video streaming. So there were new things coming online, but I was using his book mostly for my calculations. And then a few days after I finished my project, he published his updated version. So, you know, it did sort of change, you know, some things I overestimated, some things I underestimated. But it was very revealing. You know, most things had gone down, but, you know, things like an egg was went up from 300 grams to 340 grams because cutting down rainforests to grow soya, to ship over here, to feed our chickens, you know. So there, you know, most things were going in the right direction, but there were things definitely going in the wrong direction. And then this other book here is called Living the 1.5 Degree Lifestyle. So I was in contact with Lloyd Alter on Twitter. He lives in Toronto in Canada, and he writes for Tree Hugger, he's writing for The Guardian, but also as an architect and professor. And we discussed writing a book on this subject, and he decided, we decided actually, because he was best placed to write a book, and he wrote about the 2.5 ton target for 2030. So I do recommend that book. It's very, very well researched, and he was sort of doing what I was doing, but on an Excel spreadsheet. He was using that as his main way of recording his carbon footprint. So one of the first things I did before my project started, in a sense, I thought, well, you know, what's for free? You know, what do I not have to calculate? What can I do? You know, what are all the things I can do? And I really don't need to care. I don't need to even think about whether it's going to use up my carbon budget. So there were loads. I mean, this is really a very, very small list. So these sort of things that I found out. And one of the things that really occurred to me, and you know, in terms of philosophy and looking at things in different ways, well, you know, idling, not doing anything is, you know, it's a really low carbon thing. And, you know, we are brought up in a very sort of, you know, sort of work ethic sort of society these days. And I'm a bit long in the tooth. So I remember, you know, the time when there was more time, you know, people worked shorter hours. But yeah, there are a lot of things you could do here that, you know, just enjoyable: dancing, yoga, playing music, you know, making music, writing, you know, painting, you know, or just, you know, just being with friends and chatting and laughing. these things are, there's lots of things that we really enjoy that really are carbon proof. Then I sort of had to grapple with the fact that there were some things that I really liked doing that were going to impact more than I anticipated. And I will point out a few things. Gas heating was much more carbon intensive than I anticipated, and that was really hard when I got to winter, because I think the first hour of my gas heating used up my entire carbon budget. I did get my plumber to turn down the settings, and we halved it. But yeah, I mean, that was a bit of a shock for me, and so I got cold. I mean, if it was really bad, I turned the heating on, but I wanted to partly live the experience. What happens if we don't insulate our homes and decarbonize our homes? It's not going to be good on net carbon zero. I think that was my sort of feeling. And then there were just some things that I really had to account for more. I mean, the average 1 mile per car, but I don't drive, but I mean 540 grams per mile, that's a lot. The toilet roll, it was like oh, I'm gonna have to spend 4 toilet rolls. I'm gonna have to spend nearly 2 kilos. I wasn't that happy about that. But yeah, I definitely had to take note of things like air freighted food and hot house. I didn't even know about hot house tomatoes. I learned to eat very local, very seasonal, and minimize that. So this. I mean, I'm saying this is my average day, but this is in June. There is no heating. So this will give you a kind of idea of what I could kind of do in a day, and I'm well under target here. It was 2.74, and I'm only 2.294, so I could even pass that on to another day. But a couple of glasses of wine, I'm cycling, I'm having some coffee, and I'm eating healthily, but well. I'm not actually vegan, as you can see. A lot of the food is vegan, but I didn't keep to that. But you also notice that I had to weigh this scrupulously. I could only have really within the budget 25 grams of parmesan. I mean, it's enough for a meal, but yeah, I had to be careful with the amounts of dairy or I didn't eat much meat, but I mean, if I did, I had to be careful about that too. One of the reasons I wanted to do it for a year was I just felt like, well, is it going to be different at different times of year? And it really was. I mean, winter, the heating, but also the added nutritional requirements. I mean, I'm a bit older, but I felt I needed more sort of high carbon food in a sense. The other thing was the summer. I usually go to Devon for my holidays, and the public transport, although it was fine for short distances, the longer distances were a bit, be a big carbon impact. We were on COVID, we were in the pandemic at that time, so I didn't actually have a choice in that. But yeah, I think it's important. Yeah, I mean, because I lived through a pretty cold winter, I really, after I finished the project, and one of the first things I was thinking, how can I invest in a warmer insulated flat? Now we need to rapidly decarbonize 25 million UK homes. Yes, 25 million. With insulation, heat pumps, solar, etc. And this is the biggest infrastructure project ever undertaken on UK soil. And Insulate Great Britain says, get on with it. I mean, it's really, really important. It will not be pleasant. And then, you know, here are a few of, you know, the transport options. I cycled a lot, I walked a lot. I use cycling taxi that we have available here in London. Now, I'm going to come to the public transport because although I showed you at the beginning, I divided up between individual or lifestyle carbon budgets, government carbon budgets, and capital formation carbon budgets. There actually are some things that are what I would call grey areas. And one of them, I think, is public transport. In some countries, it will be health as well. Now, these are where I think it's important that we understand that whatever the government budget is spent on is a political decision and something that we citizens need to be very aware of. Now, I would say public transport is something that should be taken into the government and maybe even the capital formation budget. So there's public transport and then there's private public transport. You know. So because I think for quality of life, we do sometimes need to travel by train and bus longer distances to see family, friends. And so that's I'm just raising the fact that there are grey areas here. It isn't as clear cut on some things. It's more clear cut. What's household, what's individual choice, and what's government. But sometimes it's a kind of what do we want? What do we want our government to do for quality of life in a net carbon zero world? I think I've been through earlier on the flights and the cars, so I think I'll go on now. So for longer distance travel and adventure, I like adventure, and I actually went on a sailing trip last year, which was fantastic. I've never been on a sort of sailing adventure holiday before. From Ramsgate up the Thames. So it is possible, but yes, I mean, I think for longer distance travel and adventure, but I also like the idea if we made it safe on our roads to go on an electric bike to a campsite, I'd be very happy to do that. I like that kind of venture. And then something like this electric bus, if it's a 90-seater electric bus, it's £6 per mile even now on our electric grid now. So you know there are possibilities for that. I've taken this out of Mike Berners-Lee new version of How Bad Bananas, a carbon footprint of everything, because I think this really explains why, you know, often people talk about individual change, you know, versus system change. But I think Mike Berners-Lee really gets it that, you know, these two things are very interrelated. You know, it's sort of, if you understand where we need to get to for net carbon zero by experimenting with your own carbon footprint, you can then understand what you need to push for change for your politicians and for your campaigning and for your activism. So, but yeah, the two are very interrelated. And he's kind of drawn them in scale. So, you know, they're not quite the same, but they are still, you know, both count. And now, you know, sort of really, I think, you know, obviously I'm one person. I'm living in London. I've just started this and experimented with this for a year. But my lifestyle and what I chose to do on the net carbon zero is very particular to me. You know, the kind of choices I've made on food or travel or, you know, just things that I want to do. But I think the more people that experiment with this, the more we start to understand, you know, what people can do on their own, and there are many things, and then what are just really, really difficult areas. And actually, we need to establish this. So I think that the more people that engage with this and really start to experiment with what they can do on their own in their local environment, and what what is really the blocks, and I think we'll get a much better picture of what are our priorities and what we need to really invest in, and what we need to ask our policy to do. So this is there's a concept of a carbon footprint and a carbon handprint, and basically they're part of the same body. But I think it's a really nice way of understanding how activism can be both. It doesn't have to be split, because both are important. And I'm just this is really just a list of other people who are involved in this area, but also I'm really going to flag up Dr. Lewis Akenji. So he conceived and led the 1.5 degree lifestyle project, and I've actually had a Zoom meeting with him, and he's very intelligent, very kind of, well, he really gets stuff, but he also gets how these things cross over in terms of policy, and also, you know, we've talked about these grey areas and how you would kind of start to understand that. So I thought I'd flag up him, but yeah, there's plenty. There's Peter Kalmus, who's a US climate scientist who also lives within about 2 tons, and then many people who are involved in looking at lifestyles as well as system change. And then here are a few links if you want to look into these more. Yeah, I think you know, it'd be really interesting to see what your questions are, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed the slideshow.
Thank you so much, Rod. That was brilliant. I think we all really appreciated that, and hopefully there will be some questions coming up in the chat. I can see there was one on a technical point slightly earlier on, which John asks if the carbon footprints you quoted for the various the public transport are per person.
Yes, per mile, sorry.
Is that per person per mile?
Yes, but Mike Berners-Lee divides the average, so they are average. So let's say, for instance, a London bus, it's the average amount of people using that bus at any time, rather than, so yeah, it's based on the average amount of people.
Great. Okay. A couple of questions from me whilst people have a chance to think. Were you surprised by the gaps and the changes in data about the carbon emissions of different items and how much we don't know about the footprint of our everyday items?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was shocked. I mean, I think I was shocked as, you know, because I'm not a scientist, I'm just an ordinary person. And yeah, I expected there just to be more information at hand. I mean, I think what happens is people direct you to the carbon calculators. And, you know, I've done that myself. But what happens when you get down to the really low numbers is that you know, they're too generalized. They're very generalized algorithms, and they will not really tailor it to your particular lifestyle. And when you get down to those low numbers, you know, 0.7 or even 2.5 tons per year, you really need to know what everything is. And I didn't cover everything. I mean, I was on a project the following year where people started to look at insurance, banking, what else were people looking at? But also the embodied carbon in people's homes, and you know, things like their Apple products and things like this. So you know, some people are going even further, and yeah, I mentioned on Twitter in 2021 that I really think that we should have a Wikipedia for carbon footprints. And it should be, because it, you know, that's quite international, and also it can be monitored in a way by experts, so that, you know, people don't just put everything in, and then it can be updated. And I think that systems really need that kind of access, either to regular handbooks or to Wikipedia or something online, to really know what the carbon footprint of everything is.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a brilliant idea. If anyone in here is that way minded, please do know that there's probably a market for that. Jan asks, what do you think your carbon footprint has been over the last year, and is it something that you can maintain?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, I think once you become, in a way, once you find out about it and you become mindful about it, I think it's probably with you for life. I'm not saying I'm perfect by any stretch, and I have been to Devon on holiday, and but also I invested in secondary glazing, which made a massive difference to the warmth of my flat, because I have a very small flat, but I have very big windows. And I don't exactly know the carbon footprint, but that was like me investing in that, and that's part of our 30 tonnes, if you were dividing it equally, our 30 tonnes lifetime carbon budget. So I would say, if you're really serious, spend your whatever you can on decarbonising your home, on creating a low carbon lifestyle now, and really be careful about burning carbon on things that are not going to be long-term things. You're not, and the next generations are going to invest. If we invest in our homes, and the next generation are going to inherit that. If we just blow it on traveling the world and buying stuff we don't need, they may not have those kind of homes, and that's going to be very tough on the net zero project.
Absolutely. So Anna asks if you could talk a little bit more about the cycling emissions and what they're attributed to, so where the 3 grams per mile comes from.
Yeah, this was a really interesting thing for me, because I have been a cycling campaigner in London, so I'd seen some of the bigger numbers, and because I was writing a diary, and so some of the bigger numbers that do appear are because you're supposed to eat more if you cycle, and therefore that would be adding to your carbon footprint. But what I made it very clear was that I was going to calculate food separately so I was calculating my food, so I didn't include that in the carbon footprint of walking or cycling. And anyway, if you're cycling a few miles, I mean, maybe some people eat, get really hungry and go for the, eat loads of food. But I mean, I don't quite, if there's a couple of miles down the road, I'm not eating more. So the 3 grams really is covering the embodied carbon of the initial buying of the bike, and then the maintenance. So over the time period, I think it's the European Cycling Federation came up with the 3 grams per mile. So that's where that calculation comes from, not including the food.
Thank you. Mervyn asks, how do we create wide acceptance of the principle we should go to net zero, that this is essential, doable, and that a low carbon life can be a good life? I'm particularly concerned that people who understand the need for net zero still don't walk the talk.
Yeah, I think the way the climate movement has evolved from some time ago is that we had loads of time to do the top-down stuff, and therefore we didn't need to consider what people's individual lifestyles would be, how they would contribute to it. After 2018, which is why I sort of focused on that at the beginning, I think a lot of us realised that this was really bad. We're getting into dangerous territory here, and we haven't seemed to have embodied it. We seem to have sort of, in a way, there's a bit of cognitive dissonance, in the sense that it's easier to kind of abstract it, to kind of stay with this sort of very top-down view of how we're going to map that pathway to net carbon zero. But by not embodying it, in a sense, we haven't got down to the nitty-gritty of what that really is. it's almost like, you know, we kind of imagine, you know, because I used to go to a lot of meetings in London, driverless cars, you know, net carbon zero world, you know, and all these sort of sci-fi visuals they used to present. And yet every time I was there, I don't think, you know, I just don't think it's going to look like that. And so, you know, although that wasn't the only reason I did the project, you know, that was kind of like, yeah, you know, I really think we need to try this out, see what this is going to look like. And I mean, really, I don't think driverless cars are part of NECA, you know. Yeah, I think a lot of people had very kind of, they wanted it to be a kind of sci-fi future kind of, you know, everything's going to be, you know, just a bit more kind of high tech and everything's going to be fine. But you know, that ship has sailed, and you know, had they done that 20, 30 years ago? Well, look, maybe, I don't know. But we're not there now. We're already in dangerous territory. I think, you know, Extinction Rebellion and Greta Thunberg and the youth climate strike, you know, have alerted us to the fact we're in a climate event. And, you know, people are on the front line, people are already losing their lives. And, you know, this could spiral out of control very, very quickly. And also because it's non-linear, I mean, I think people find it difficult to understand, but I mean, you know, we've seen these extreme weather events just popping up anywhere. They can happen anywhere. You know, a cloud can get stuck anywhere and just rain and rain and rain. Or, you know, like in Texas, you know, suddenly you get a freak cold spell. Or, you know, obviously there's extreme heat, extreme humidity. So we already know that we're in deeply, you know, people have, in a sense, have not acknowledged or accepted that we need to move much faster on this. And, you know, one of the reasons I went for the 0.7, well, I'm not 0.7, at one time, let's say 1 ton, but you know, the net carbon zero is because, yeah, I think that we might need to move very quickly. And I would rather prepare early and at least get a little bit of understanding of what we need to be putting into place, then suddenly things go very, very quickly and we're going to have to scramble around and we're not going to know what the hell we're doing. So I would definitely rather we get a grip on what this looks like for us. And I personally, I just want to accept it, you know, just accept it and go with it and choose it rather than have it done to me. Kind of thing.
One of the things that actually the question that I had that I think is a good one to go into this is in part of your diary you talk about idea of net zero counsellors.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could talk a bit more about that as an idea, like explain like what it would be and kind of how you could see it working, because I think it's such a great idea and I think it's definitely something to share.
Yeah, it's interesting that you picked up on that because yes, you must have read through quite a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that, I mean, obviously people are in very different places with this. You know, there are some people who are really not that far off. And then there are other people who, in a sense, their lives have evolved around cheap access to fossil fuels. You know, some people have marriages across the world. You know, some people have, you know, kids, you know, so they really, some people have, their lives have evolved in a way that makes a lot of this really, really difficult. And then some people have just, you know, they may become addicted to cars or very car dependent and culturally kind of, you know, set up their life in a certain kind of way. And I do think that we need to be empathetic. You know, I'm not saying that you know, obviously we have to be serious about this, but at the same time, I still think we can be empathetic and really help people who, you know, really could get stuck. And one of the ideas was really to have a kind of jury service thing. So not, I mean, this is the Extinction Rebellion thing of people. Oh, sorry, what was it called? I can't remember what it's called now. You know, where they had the idea of people coming together and discussing things. So that was. But I think that the idea that people were given time, so they were allocated time on a kind of jury service basis of actually coming together and actually discussing how their community was going to, or how individuals were going to support each other in mapping their own pathway down to net carbon zero. And yeah, I think there are ways of counselling or just support really in how to do it and you know how to make the most of it, how to enjoy it really. That it doesn't have to be, you know, just sacrifice. It's actually sometimes you haven't noticed what's out there and that could be out there for you and your community if things just changed a bit.
A sort of a related question from Emily, and that is, she asked, what sort of reaction have you had from friends and family? Were there any converts or cynics, and do you have any top tips for the latter?
I mean, you know, I'm eccentric. my family know that. So, you know, obviously when I said I was going to do this, I think people were like, I mean, you know, obviously there was a reaction. I took it very seriously, and I think some of my family, you know, found that a little bit difficult, that I was so serious about it, and that in a sense, you know, I'm gathering together information, and some of that information is not easy for people to hear. And I understand that, and as somebody who's been on Twitter for 7 years quite seriously, wanting to influence political actors and, you know, people who have power across the world, sometimes I've had to be very direct, very sort of how do I put it, you know, no nonsense kind of, yeah, look, these are the facts. You know, with family, friends and the wider community, one of the reasons I've come off Twitter is because whilst that was appropriate for influencing people in powerful positions, I also think that we need, you know, or I need to have conversations with people in a different way in the community and with friends and family, because otherwise I think it can alienate people, and I do understand that. So I'm slightly shifting. It's not that I will never do the no nonsense stuff again, sort of, because I think facts are important, and I think it's easy to sometimes think, oh, that's a bit problematic. Let's pretend that's not true. But at the same time, you know, I think as a community and as I think as human beings, you know, this is a massive transformation. I mean, you know, this is so big. This is like a massive civilization change, and you know, we really are going to have to support and nurture each other through this. So yes, I'm taking a bit of time out to work out how to do that. And yeah, with cynics, you know, I think I have a mixed response. It's sometimes I let it go. I will say what I think is the truth, and then you know, I'll let it go because people need to. And sometimes the defensive response is the first response. I have had people who literally got angry with me. I mean, just really seriously And I was like, whoa, hadn't expected that. And then, sometimes I've met people a year later and they say, I really thought about what you said, and yeah, I think I understand, and I'm sorry I was angry, but that was quite a lot of information to take on at that moment in time. So if I'm on Twitter and I was arguing with a certain type of person who's in a powerful position, I might just give it, really give it and go on full debate mode. But I think it's different to the community. We sometimes do have to let things go and trust people. That people will move at different times and in different ways.
Okay, I'm going to go back to a technical question, because we do like the facts as well as the feelings, as you said. So Jane asks, could you explain a bit more about solar PV on our homes? Says if we have it, does it mean that we can increase our budget a little bit?
Well, I mean, I mentioned the 30 tons of lifetime carbon budget. Now, of course, if you're on 10, well, if you're on the average UK system, 13 tons per year, you're going to go through that pretty quickly. If you're on the 1 ton, you're not, and you will have plenty of budget to spend on solar, insulating your home. The essentials that you will need in your household to, sorry, I think my internet's gone.
No, it's all right, we've got you.
Yeah, okay, good. The essentials that you'll need for a good life. But yes, no, if you're burning on flying around the world and buying lots of stuff you don't need, buying new cars, lots of new cars, and then obviously you're going to go through that carbon budget extremely quickly. So the choices that we make now are incredibly important, not just for us, but you've got to think about the fact that you're not just doing it for yourself. You're investing in our housing infrastructure, and I'm calling it housing infrastructure. It is your home, but your home is part of the long-term housing infrastructure for the people who are living in this country. And if you invest in insulation, in heat pumps, solar, I mean, you are investing for the long term in that. And you will not just benefit yourself, but you'll be benefiting anybody else who lives in your home. So yeah, I think it's very important.
Actually, that ties into a question that I noted to myself quite a long time back, which is about do you get frustrated by the dismissal of the power of individual action as part of the fight? And do you think it is being used because people truly believe that they're not powerful enough, or do you believe people use it as a way to not take action, or do you think it's a mixture of both?
I think there's lots of reasons. I think there's lots. I mean, it's only just. I mentioned it's only just gone into the IPCC report. Now, I did some very basic economics when I was at A level, and demand and supply are two sides of the same coin. And when you buy something, you send a message to produce more of it. And I think that there is, if business has its way, it doesn't, a lot of people see us as consumers. We are the people that are asking them to produce more of their product. And we do that in many ways. And it is problematic for big business, corporations, if we then understand that we need to actually cut our consumption. And I showed you the graph, the Oxfam wine glass. We are on hyperconsumption. We have normalized hyperconsumption within our culture. I'm 60 now, so I remember the 60s and 70s. You know, growing up, and people had a lot less. People, you know, secondhand was normal, and you know, people just had less of everything. I've seen that over the years develop into a culture of hyperconsumption. You know, where people go on, you know, they fly around the world maybe 5 times or more per year. They buy loads of clothes, stuff they don't need really. You know, have multiple homes, and you know, this is something that our culture has engineered, and big business and corporations, they want that to keep going. If we know that we need to get down to 0.7 tons to be in balance, you know, to be in natural carbon balance, and not make the problem worse, because that's what 0.7 is. It's not making, you are not contributing to the problem. Anything over 0.7 tons, I'm sorry, but you are still contributing. And if people really get that and want to stop it getting worse, and do that en masse by cutting their consumption, of course, that affects the corporations. And who is making, I mean, if you look at the IPCC, the corporations are the most powerful part of that. The economics is driving the way they are mapping out the idea that we can reach net carbon zero by 2050 with driverless cars, and you know, sort of, you know, maintaining this hyperconsumption. We can't, and therefore this really is a cultural metamorphosis. This kind of really challenges their business model, and therefore, so when people are like, you know, doing the kind of divide and conquer, I would call it divide and conquer strategy, where you say, oh, it's got to be system change or it's got to be individual change, but it can't be both. You know, so you've got to choose. Basically, they say you've got to choose. And so and the most important way they say people have to choose is choose system change. It's always system change, which is actually the thing that is most difficult to change, actually. But they're always saying that. But it is a divide and conquer thing. We don't need to choose. I mean, where does that come from? We don't need to choose. We can do both, you know? And, you know, that's the truth. So we would be careful we're not being herded in one direction or the other by the corporations. That's my opinion anyway.
No, I think that's a brilliant point, and I'm just going to fit in a couple more before we start drawing down, and I will go to Veronica's question because it's related, which she says we are in the North are almost locked into the consumer society. How do we tackle the harm of it without putting the thousands of people out of employment?
Yeah, I mean, this is really important because, you know, I never believe there is a silver bullet policy. It really is, I would say, a sort of metamorphosis. And so when people talk about, you know, basic income, or I like to call it core, you know, a core income, yeah, we really are talking about a different model of society, where people who, I mean, I know I mentioned idling, and, you know, people may laugh at that, but I mean, you know, in a sense, a lot of work, not all work, but a lot of work is about producing stuff that is high carbon and actually we don't need. And therefore, if you're looking to change that, then obviously some people will need a core basic income. But then other people, you know, 25 million homes to decarbonize. I mean, that's massive. That is a massive amount of jobs. So it's really about, you know, changing the way people, I mean, it's about doing maybe less work in some cases, in some areas, but in other areas where people can get involved in really being involved in that massive infrastructural problem. I mean, there are just jobs waiting to be done, and I'm sure your heat pump guy, there are many people who just need investment by people. I mean, they need citizens to be investing in the jobs of the people to decarbonize their homes, because this is one of the most fundamental changes. Also, agriculture, the way I can't go into everything, but yeah, the way agriculture, so there are going to be new types of jobs with that, and I think we could completely change the way that we grow food here to be actually pleasant. It's not like hard labor. It's like we share as a community, we do it as a community, and we take turns so that people don't get burnt out, and we work out a way of making work enjoyable, and having free time without being slaves. At the moment, we're slaves to the corporations, and people just aren't having fun, the way they could. And so I think that we need to really think about this in the round, in the whole, and be really sort of expand our minds on what this could be. I'm only one person, but the whole of us, we can come up with so many different ways of looking at it, so many different perspectives, and try stuff out, share with each other, and find a way from the grassroots up, find our own way of doing this. Yeah.
And I think I'll draw it to a close there, because that feels like a really nice note to end on. I can see there's been a few recommendations in the comments for reading and all of that, and what we'll do is we can send an email round after the event with your recommendations from your slide and the things here, so if people want to learn more and if they want to try it themselves, which I really hope they do, I'm certainly going to be giving it a go. So yeah, we'll send out some information to help people do some thinking and get started if they do. But I just want to say thank you so much for your time and for everyone using up a little bit of carbon to come and do this, because I think it will all inspire us to save more than we have used this evening, and hopefully zero, or at least a carbon or even a carbon negative effect on what we can do going forwards. So I'd just like to thank you ever so much, and I think the committee would like to thank you ever so much as well. We're really grateful.
Thank you so much for your questions. It's really good for me also, to kind of be, a little bit challenged and to think of things in different ways. So thanks so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
And thank you so much. So I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping whilst people get ready to log off, so that BCCF will be taking a break from events in August, but we will be back for Great Big Green Week, which is from the 24th of September to the 2nd of October with something. We'll keep you posted on that. If you'd like to find out about other Great Big Green Week events throughout the country and in Bedford, or you've got something you'd like to put on yourself, however big or small, if you go to greatbiggreenweek.com, you can find lots of information there. And if you Google Twitter Great Big Green Week Bedford, there is a Twitter account of things going on there. So I think that is it for now. We hope everyone has a good rest of evening and happy carbon budgeting.